Let us say a very good morning to Nigel Farage, leader of Reform UK. Nigel, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
I don't think my characterisation of the love-in yesterday was wrong. It really was quite remarkable how people were treating Joe Biden not only as if he was the saviour of the planet, but also as if he's never done it before.
Yes, and wall-to-wall support for that in today's UK newspapers, you'll notice. Everyone's saying it's a wonderful, brave new start. New, this guy's been on Capitol Hill for nearly half a century. New, he was the vice president for 8 years. New, shades of it, reminded me of 2008, reminded me of the Obama inauguration. You know, Obama was very good at saying, you know, this is our time. I mean, it all meant nothing,
right?
But it was lovely, platitudinous stuff. And as you quite rightly say, that nasty man, that terrible man, the man who brought peace to the Middle East, the man who made ordinary Americans richer, the man who had the courage to stand up to the Chinese Communist Party and their human rights abuses, the man who even stepped across the line into North Korea in an attempt to get the most dangerous world leader to try to come to some form of agreement. That's how nasty Trump was.
Well, let's not forget, he also managed to tame Iran, which was becoming a more and more dangerous rogue state. He took out their main protagonist. He created trade between Israel and the UAE for the first time ever. I mean, it's quite extraordinary. One of my favourite speech of Obama's was the one he did in Berlin when he promised to rid the world of nuclear weapons. That didn't go too well.
Yes, I mean, this, and you touched on it earlier, but, you know, everyone's saying it's a return to normality. So who are we going to bomb then?
Yeah, right.
Well, because that was normality.
And also,
and by the way, not just, I mean, let's be fair about this, not just under the Democrats, but under the Bush-style Republicans as well.
Yeah.
We had decades of American presidents going to war at the drop of a hat, and we, the British, always meekly following on. So I hope it's not a return to normality. Now, clearly the big theme of the speech was about unity. And as such, I don't criticize that as a theme because America is very divided. Twice in the speech, Biden talked about the problem in America caused by white supremacists. And he's not wrong, Mike, to mention that. Of course he's not. There is a problem. There are extremes on the right in America. And it's perhaps a shame that President Trump didn't do more to separate himself away from some of them, all right? But what Biden, hey, it's all the same. What he didn't mention was the fact that on the left, we have Antifa and Black Lives Matter, who were looting, rioting, causing 24 murders, and actually setting fire to a couple of dozen American cities last year over a very prolonged period. So if he really is going to aim at unity, he has to bring both sides together. And you can't just exclude extremists on the right unless you exclude extremists on the left. You need to be even-handed about this. And here's my concern, all right? I mean, apart from his cognitive abilities, but here's my concern. My concern is that the Democrats have been infiltrated, just as the British Labour Party was in Corbyn's years. They've been infiltrated by a new hard left who believe in very dangerous ideas like critical race theory. All right. These are all designed to separate people out as opposed to bringing them together. Think of the words of Martin Luther King. I want my 4 children to be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And what critical race theory, what white privilege, what these academic theories that have now permeated a significant part of the Democrat Party seek to do is actually divide us all up into black, white, Asian, whatever else it may be. And my worry is that a relatively weak US president will not be able to control these people.
Yes, I think that's absolutely right. And it's extraordinary, really, for the America that you and I know very well to have been able to have gone that far left, isn't it? Because, I mean, it's not the America that I know.
No, it is strange. But then who would have thought we would have had a Labour Party in the United Kingdom whose leader was quite openly anti-Semitic? So there are some very odd things happening, you know, on the left of politics. And indeed, let us be even-handed. There's some pretty extreme views on the right as well.
Yeah, absolutely right. What do you make of the Donald Trump movement, as he referred to it before he left Washington, and the fact that he may start? I was hearing this sort of late yesterday afternoon. He may start a new party called the Patriot Party, which would already have, if you count the people on his side inside of the Capitol building, would already have representation if they were to jump from the Republicans to him.
So what's happening here is the lower house, the House of Representatives, voted to impeach the president. Okay, that then goes to the Senate. The Senate effectively becomes a court. We don't quite yet know where that's going to be, but within the next 2 or 3 weeks, there will be a hearing and a vote on whether to impeach the president. For that to happen, it would need 2/3 of the Senate to vote for impeachment. That would mean, given that half the senators are there from the Democrats, it would need 17, 17 of the Republican senators to vote to impeach Trump. And if they did that, he would be barred from running for office again under the American Constitution, all right? So I think when Trump threatens a Patriot Party, what he's saying to those senators who aren't quite sure what to do, and by the way, their leader, Mitch McConnell, has already made it clear that he intends to vote for impeachment. What he's saying to them is, if you do this, you will blow up the Republican Party. And I'm old enough, and so are you, Mike, I'm afraid. I'm old enough to remember 1990 in this country. The most successful Conservative Prime Minister there had been in the history of the party. She'd won 3 general elections, but she'd gone down a new route, which was Euroscepticism, all right? In the country, of course, that was very popular, but her parliamentary colleagues were horrified. They ousted her, and the Conservative Party did not regain its confidence for about 20 years. And I think we're seeing a parallel here, because if you look at the opinion polling, Lord Ashcroft has done some very, very in-depth polling of Trump voters. 2/3 of Trump voters, and that's over 50 million, all right? 2/3 of Trump voters do not think he's done anything wrong at all and love his style. 1/3 of Trump voters are unhappy with the events of the 6th of January, sometimes find him a bit over the top, but don't regret voting for him. So if Mitch McConnell and the men in grey suits think that by getting rid of Trump and by trying to erase Trumpism from the Republican Party, that somehow this is their salvation, they're on the verge of what would be a huge historic mistake.
I think to even to try and impeach him in the Senate is going to be a huge mistake for the Democrats. I think the best thing they can do is just to move on, because the one thing that we can be very sure about, Nigel, as you said in your video about whether you regretted supporting him, which of course you don't, is that the reason Trump got elected in 2016 was because people were sick to death of the establishment. They were fed up with being talked down to, dictated to, told what they should and shouldn't believe in, and they wanted something different. And that's what Trump provided. Now, if we go back, as you say, to what it was like before, then the people who voted for Trump are not simply going to go away, are they?
No. Oh, no. I mean, look, Trump, rather like the Brexit vote, you know, people like myself didn't hypnotize the British public over 30 years. Right. We just made them aware of what the European Union was. And the more they looked at it, the less they liked it. And the more they saw a Westminster establishment out of touch with their views. The Trump phenomenon is very similar. And I'll tell you something, if Trump was just to disappear, someone's going to come forward and represent the view that is held by over 50 million, maybe as many as 70 million Americans who feel that Washington, D.C. is effectively on a different planet, doesn't represent their hopes, thoughts, and aspirations in any way at all. And you may well find, if they get rid of Trump and bar him from office a second time, that someone comes along who really is scary.
Well, I mean, there's no question as well that if he was impeached and if he was prevented from ever running for office again, that would have a massive effect for mobilisation of the disenfranchised voters of America, and they would stand by anyone that he put up as perhaps the leader of the new Patriot Party, but not the candidate. He would find a candidate, and I mean, I think they could actually bust the two-party system in the US that way.
It is possible. I mean, as we know from this country, breaking two-party politics under the first past the post system is a very difficult thing to do. But, as we saw with Mrs. May in 2019, when she led the Conservative Party into albeit a European election, but into a European election, the brand new Brexit Party crushed them. They got 8% of the vote, their worst result for 200 years. We also saw in Canada 30 years ago a new Reform Party that came along, and the Conservatives, who were the party in power, sunk to 2 seats. So it's unusual to break the two-party system. It's not impossible. And as I say, if Mitch McConnell and others think that going back to the Republicans being run by a bunch of boring old men in grey suits is their salvation, they are in for a terrible shock.
They really are. And I mean, you can also look at Scotland. I mean, the Labour Party used to have a lock on Scotland, 48 seats pretty much guaranteed every single election. Now, I don't think they'll ever get back into power because they'll never get those seats back. They lost them to the SNP. They're never coming back.
No, and equally, of course, before the Good Friday Agreement in Northern Ireland, politics was dominated by the Ulster Unionists and the SDLP. They've almost disappeared, both of them. So these things can happen. And I just hope that enough of those Republican senators realise that they actually owe their existence to the fact that Trump, whether you like his style or not, he's a brash New Yorker. We know that. But has he connected extraordinarily with a huge number of Americans? And when you think, he got 11 million votes more in this presidential election than he got the one before, and they need not to forget that.
No, absolutely right. Speaking of elections, interesting conversations being had at the moment around the May elections. Obviously, you've now got your name change that you asked for. The actual commission have gone from the Brexit Party. You're now the Reform UK Party. Obviously, you're hoping that there are going to be elections, I'm assuming.
I think there have to be. I really think there have to be. We cannot postpone these elections. Some have been postponed, of course, already. Do you know what? If, because of social distancing and worries about the virus, we decide to keep the polling stations open for 2 or 3 days, where's the harm in that? Where's the harm in that? Where there's a will, Mike, there's a way. We can hold these elections safely. It can be done. And I think it must be done, to be honest.
Yes, absolutely right. And I mean, it's strange that those who don't wish to have elections are those, it would seem, who fear that they might not win them.
Well, yes, all those that are in power already.
Yes.
If you're there already, I mean, why not just stay on forever?
Right.
I mean, democracy is only useful when you're on the winning side, or you hold the cards.
I was listening this morning to the conversations around the Ugandan elections, where the bloke apparently has been in since 1986, and they've just banned the internet.
Yeah. Well, of course. Isn't it funny that all these people that accuse Donald Trump of being a monster and an anti-democrat, what have they got to say about China? What have they got to say about countries like Uganda? It seems almost nothing. Some very strange double standards in our commentary.
Yeah, there absolutely are. As far as the way that the Reform UK Party is kind of rolling out, are you finding it a bit more difficult than you were expecting it to be? Because obviously you had a launch in Scotland, a couple of weeks ago. But there's been so much in the news about COVID that it must be very difficult to kind of break through that.
Well, yes, of course. But the other thing is, my entire political career was based on one thing. That was getting out round the country and meeting people. I'm not good at very much, but I'm quite good at that.
Quite good at getting us out of the European Union, you'd have to say.
Well, yeah, I know, but that was because we built a grassroots movement.
Yeah.
We built a grassroots movement which threatened the very existence of the Conservative Party, who in the end came to their senses. But no, what I've always done is to go and walk about street markets, visit the pubs, do public events in town halls or whatever else it may be, engage with local media. I've done that for 3 decades. That's what I'm good at. And at the minute, of course, it's just impossible to do those things. So, yes, it is very tough to get something new to really take off when you're prohibited from going out and doing that.
And we here at Talk Radio, as you know, Nigel, have been very vociferous, and we've spoken to your colleagues, Richard Tice and others, about the whole business of trying to lift this lockdown. And we know now that, we've got a very bad period of proper death rates going on at the moment, bad period of infections, bad period of the disease spreading. But we must really pressurise the government, mustn't we, to give us some clue as to what they're going to do and when they're going to do it.
They don't know. They just don't know, do they? Isn't it funny?
I don't think they do.
The response to the leak story yesterday that Priti Patel wanted to close the borders last March to stop the virus getting in is Boris Johnson getting up and saying we have some of the tightest border controls in the world. Well, yeah, 10 months later we do.
Well, when he said that, I sort of mumbled under my breath, well, apart from at Dover, apparently.
Well, yeah. If you want to come across by inflatable, that's absolutely fine. By the way, it's calm tomorrow, so tomorrow's a good day for crossing the channel. You can bet your life people will be. Look, it can't be easy to be a cabinet member or prime minister right now. I think we've got to be, say that these are tough times. But I do think that we have a government that appears to be pushed by events, blown around by the wind, rather than actually taking a lead. And there's a forgotten group of people out there, completely forgotten group of people. They're not talked about. No one really cares about them because nobody in government actually understands who they are or what they are. There's 6 million of them, and they run small businesses. They run little limited companies. They act as sole traders, and some of them are absolutely being crushed by this. They can't see any way out. Many of them don't qualify for government support for a variety of reasons. And so this huge divide that's opening up in the country is between those that work for the public sector and those who are self-employed working in the private sector. And for them, lockdown is a complete and utter catastrophe. Now, if I was really convinced that lockdown reduced the spread of the virus, I'd probably have to accept it. But I'm not convinced the figures tell us anything like that.
No, it's very, very mixed, the picture as well. And I wonder as well, you mentioned that Washington, D.C. is nothing like the rest of America. I'm beginning to think that London is going that way too, because London is full of public sector workers, full of people who do menial jobs, blue-collar jobs, but also full of people that work in charities, in the charitable sector. And so it's a very different picture to the one around the country, isn't it?
Yes, and also, and this gets forgotten, a lot of those who are in the private sector exist and survive on government contracts. Whether it's firms like Serco, whoever else it may be.
Yeah.
So, we've seen this massive growth of government. London is the capital. And you're absolutely right. London is now more dependent on public taxpayer money than it's ever been. I guess we should include the BBC in that too, shouldn't we?
I'm afraid so, yeah, absolutely right, even though they did move a small part of themselves up to Salford for a bit. But listen, Nigel, great to talk to you. I think we covered pretty much everything now. I think I'd rather you were saving the world than Joe Biden, but that's another story. Nigel Farage, leader of the Reform UK Party, a man that makes absolute sense about so many things, talking there about how Trump and Trumpism isn't going away. You can be sure of that. And if they try and stifle it and they try and shut him down, he'll just come back in another form, surely.